The veterinarian didn't expect to save 2 lives that November morning, a Navy SEAL and his war dog, both bleeding out on her clinic floor. And she definitely didn't know the men who'd shot them were coming back to finish the job. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from. And if you want to support the channel, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. Pine Haven, Montana existed as little more than a stubborn memory against the advancing cold. The town clung to the eastern slope of the Bitterroot Range like something that refused to die despite every reason to surrender. 3,000 souls called it home, though that number shrank each winter when the young and ambitious fled for warmer, more prosperous places. November had arrived with its usual cruelty. Temperatures dropping below freezing at night, the first dustings of snow turning the pine forests into something beautiful and merciless. The sky held that particular gray quality that promised worse to come, clouds pressing down like a hand slowly closing into a fist. Wind came in sharp gusts that rattled windows and sent dried leaves skittering across empty streets like refugees searching for shelter they would never find. The main road cut through town like a scar, 2 lanes of cracked asphalt lined with buildings that had seen better decades. A gas station, a diner with a flickering neon sign, a general store that sold everything from ammunition to baby formula. And at the northern edge, where civilization began its gradual surrender to wilderness, stood the Pine Haven Veterinary Clinic, a low structure of weathered wood and stone that had served the community for 3 decades under the steady hands of Dr. Eleanor Voss. Jack Mercer's truck moved through town with the quiet efficiency of a machine, built for purpose rather than comfort. The Ford F-150 was 10 years old, dark gray, unremarkable except for how clean it remained despite the mountain roads. He drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes moving in constant assessment, checking mirrors, scanning sidewalks, noting vehicles parked along the street, and whether they'd been there during his last visit 3 weeks ago. The vigilance was unconscious now, wired so deep into his nervous system that relaxation felt like a foreign language he'd forgotten how to speak. At 34, Jack carried his 205 pounds with an economy of motion that suggested violence held in careful suspension. He was 6'2", with dark hair cut military short and a face that might have been handsome if it weren't so carefully blank. His eyes, gray as the November sky, held a watchful quality that made people uncomfortable without quite knowing why. He wore jeans, work boots, and a canvas jacket that concealed the Glock 19 riding at his hip, a habit he couldn't break, even though the war had been over for 8 months. In the passenger seat, Titan sat with the stillness of a statue carved from muscle and bone. The German Shepherd weighed 95 pounds, his coat dark sable with the characteristic black saddle across his back. At 6 years old, he remained in his prime despite the shrapnel scars that marked his left shoulder. Pale lines through the fur that matched the similar marks along Jack's ribs and back. The dog's amber eyes tracked movement through the windshield with the same trained vigilance as his handler, ears swiveling to catch sounds Jack's human hearing would miss. They'd been together for 4 years of operations across 3 countries. Titan had saved Jack's life twice that he could count, probably more times he'd never know about. The dog had detected IEDs before convoys rolled over them, had alerted to ambushes before they sprung, had dragged a wounded Jack to cover under machine gun fire during that final operation in Kandahar that had ended both their careers. They'd been medically retired together, shipped stateside together, and now lived together in a rented cabin 8 miles outside Pine Haven, where Jack sought the kind of peace that always seemed to hover just beyond reach. The clinic appeared ahead, and Jack eased off the accelerator. It was a simple building, single-story, with a covered porch and a hand-painted sign that read Pine Haven Veterinary Clinic, Dr. Eleanor Voss, DVM, all creatures welcome. The attached residence was visible to the left, a small house that shared walls with the clinic, smoke rising from its chimney. 3 vehicles sat in the gravel parking area, an older Subaru Outback that Jack recognized as Dr. Voss's personal vehicle, and 2 others that made his shoulders tighten reflexively. One was a black Chevy Tahoe with municipal plates and a light bar across the roof. The other was a silver pickup truck. New enough that the paint still held its showroom shine. Both vehicles sat at angles that suggested their occupants hadn't been invited and didn't particularly care about courtesy. Jack pulled into a spot near the road, leaving clear sight lines to the entrance and an unobstructed path back to the highway. Old habits. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening. Titan's ears swiveled forward, focused on the clinic's front door. The dog remained silent, but tension had entered his posture, the subtle tightening of muscle that preceded action. Through the clinic's front window, Jack could see movement. Figures. 3 men inside with Dr. Voss. The body language was wrong. The men standing too close, the veterinarian's posture defensive, backed toward the examination counter. Jack watched for 30 seconds. Titan's eyes never left the building. "Just a checkup," Jack said quietly, though whether he was convincing the dog or himself remained unclear. "We get you looked at, we leave. None of our business." Titan turned his head slightly, amber eyes meeting Jack's gray ones. The look was eloquent in its skepticism. Jack opened the door and stepped out into the cold. The wind hit immediately, carrying the scent of pine and approaching snow. Titan leaped down beside him, landing with barely a sound despite his weight, and fell into heel position automatically, left side, shoulder aligned with Jack's knee, ready to move when his handler moved. They crossed the gravel lot. Jack's hand hung loose at his side, but his awareness expanded outward in concentric rings, cataloging everything. The Tahoe's engine was still warm, heat shimmer visible above the hood. The silver pickup had mud splattered across the wheel wells, despite the vehicle's otherwise pristine condition. The clinic door was closed, but not locked. Through the window, the figures had shifted. One of the men was pointing at Dr. Voss now, finger jabbing the air in emphasis. Jack opened the door. The interior was exactly as he remembered from previous visits. Clean, organized, smelling of antiseptic and dog shampoo. Examination table in the center. Cabinets along the walls filled with supplies and medications, a scale for weighing animals, posters showing animal anatomy and vaccination schedules. And 4 people, frozen in tableau like actors suddenly aware of an audience. Dr. Eleanor Voss stood behind the examination table, one hand resting on its stainless steel surface. She was 62 years old, gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt under her white medical coat. Her face carried the weathered quality of someone who'd spent decades working with her hands, lines around her eyes from squinting in sunlight and smiling at worried pet owners. But she wasn't smiling now. Her expression held a combination of anger and fear that made something cold settle in Jack's stomach. The 3 men turned as the door opened. The first wore a sheriff's uniform, tan shirt, dark pants, badge gleaming on his chest. He was late 40s, running to weight around the middle, with thinning brown hair and a face that suggested meanness held in check by public office. His hand rested on his duty belt near his sidearm, not quite touching it but close enough to constitute a threat. The other 2 wore civilian clothes but carried themselves with similar authority. Both were younger, mid-30s, built like men who spent considerable time in gyms. One had a shaved head and a scar through his left eyebrow. The other wore his blonde hair long enough to tie back, with the kind of precisely trimmed beard that required daily maintenance. Neither was visibly armed, but Jack's trained eye caught the slight bulges at their waistbands. Concealed carry, probably 9mm. The silence stretched. Titan remained perfectly still at Jack's left side, but the dog's focus had locked onto the 3 men with laser intensity. The sheriff recovered first, his hand dropping away from his belt as he manufactured a smile that never reached his eyes. "Clinic's closed right now, friend. Official business. You'll need to come back later." Jack's gaze moved from the sheriff to Dr. Voss. "Ma'am, is that correct? Should I come back later?" Dr. Voss's fingers tightened on the examination table. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady despite the fear in her eyes. "No, Mr. Mercer, your appointment is scheduled for now." These gentlemen were just leaving. The sheriff's manufactured smile collapsed into something harder. He took a step forward, his bulk filling the space between the examination table and the door. "I don't think you heard me. I said we're conducting official business here. That means you turn around and walk back out that door." Jack didn't move. His hands remained loose at his sides, his posture relaxed. But something in his stillness made the 2 civilian men exchange glances. Titan sat perfectly motionless, amber eyes tracking the sheriff's movement with predatory focus. "Your name, Sheriff?" Jack's voice was quiet, conversational. The question clearly wasn't what the sheriff expected. He blinked, caught off balance. "What? Your name. If this is official business, you should identify yourself properly. A flush crept up the sheriff's neck. Sheriff Dale Hutchins. And you are? Jack Mercer. I have an appointment with Dr. Voss to have my dog examined. Since this is a veterinary clinic and I'm here with an animal requiring medical attention, I believe that constitutes legitimate business. Jack paused. Unless you're suggesting a county sheriff has authority to interfere with a private medical practice, conducting scheduled appointments. The two civilians had moved slightly, spreading apart to create better angles. The motion was subtle but unmistakable to anyone with tactical training. Jack's awareness tracked them both without his eyes moving from Hutchins. The sheriff's jaw tightened. He glanced at Dr. Voss, then back to Jack. Whatever he saw in Jack's face made him recalculate. We'll continue our conversation later, Dr. Voss. You think about what we discussed. Think real hard. He moved toward the door, gesturing for the other two men to follow. As they passed, the one with the shaved head let his shoulder bump against Jack's, not hard enough to be an assault, but deliberate enough to send a message. Jack absorbed the contact without reaction, his body as immovable as a rooted tree. At the door, Hutchins turned back. Word of advice, friend. Pinehaven's a small town. Folks here look out for each other, understand each other's business. Outsiders who stick their nose where it doesn't belong sometimes find the winters here aren't very welcoming. Then they were gone. The Tahoe and the silver pickup started up, gravel crunching under tires, as they pulled onto the road and disappeared back toward town. Jack waited 30 seconds, watching through the window until both vehicles were completely out of sight. Only then did he turn to Dr. Voss. You okay? She released a breath she'd been holding, her shoulders sagging slightly. I am now, thank you for that. Though I'm not sure you did yourself any favors. What did they want? Dr. Voss moved around the examination table and locked the front door, flipping the sign to closed. When she turned back, fatigue showed in every line of her face. The same thing they've wanted for the past 6 months. My land. She gestured toward the back of the clinic. Let's get Titan looked at. We can talk while I work. The examination room was smaller, more private, with better lighting and more specialized equipment. Jack lifted Titan onto the examination table with practiced ease, the dog accepting the handling with patient tolerance. Dr. Voss washed her hands thoroughly, then began her examination with gentle, competent movements, checking Titan's eyes, ears, teeth, listening to his heart and lungs. You're military, she said as she worked. It wasn't a question. Wise. Both of you. Her fingers carefully probed the scarred tissue on Titan's left shoulder. These are shrapnel wounds. 6 months old, maybe 8? 8. She nodded, continuing her examination in silence for a moment. Then, my husband was Army, Vietnam. He understood about not wanting to talk about it. She glanced up. He also understood about recognizing when something wrong is happening and having the training to do something about it. Jack said nothing, waiting. Voss moved to a cabinet and retrieved a syringe and a small vial. Titan's doing well. The scarring has healed cleanly, no signs of infection or complications. I'm going to give him an anti-inflammatory shot for that shoulder. I can see he's favoring it slightly. Probably bothers him more when the weather turns cold. She administered the injection with smooth efficiency. Titan barely flinched. My husband died 3 years ago, Dr. Voss continued, her voice steady, but carrying an undercurrent of grief that time had. Dulled but not erased. Cancer. We'd run this clinic together for 27 years. He's the business rind. I was the medical expertise. When he passed, I inherited everything. The clinic, our home, and 15 acres of land that extends back into the national forest. She set the syringe aside and met Jack's eyes directly. 6 months ago, a man named Marcus Highland made me an offer on the property, $2 million. He owns a development corporation, builds luxury resorts in Montana and Wyoming. Apparently, my land is the last piece he needs for some massive project he's planning. You said no. I said no. Dr. Voss's expression hardened. This clinic is my husband's legacy. This land is where we built our life together. I've delivered puppies and foals and calves on this property. I've treated animals for families who couldn't afford to pay me a dime, and I'd do it again. This place matters. It's not for sale. Jack could read the rest in her face, but he asked anyway. And Highland didn't accept that answer? He offered $3 million, then $4 million. Each time I refused, the offers got more aggressive. Then, Sheriff Hutchins started showing up, citing code violations that don't exist, threatening to shut me down. Small things started happening. My fence got cut, my mailbox knocked over, obscene phone calls in the middle of the night. Last week, someone poisoned 2 of my rescue dogs. Anger flickered through Jack's carefully maintained control. Did they survive? Barely. I had to work through the night to save them. Her voice cracked slightly. They're innocent animals. What kind of person does that? The kind who needs to be stopped, Jack thought, but didn't say. Instead, you've reported this to authorities outside the county? Who would I call? Hutchins is the law here. The state police are stretched thin, and without proof of who's doing this, there's nothing they can do. Highland's careful. Nothing ever traces directly back to him. She looked down at Titan, running her hand gently along his back. I'm alone here, Mr. Mercer. I have no family, no one to back me up. I'm 62 years old, and I'm terrified every time the sun goes down. Jack studied her for a long moment. He'd come to Pine Haven seeking isolation, running from memories that wouldn't let him sleep, and a sense of purpose that had died somewhere in the Kandahar Mountains. The cabin 8 miles outside town was supposed to be a refuge where he could decompress, process, maybe eventually figure out what a Navy SEAL did when the war was over and nobody needed him to be a weapon anymore. He told himself he was done. No more missions, no more fights that weren't his to fight. But standing in this clinic, looking at a 62-year-old widow who'd spent the night saving poisoned dogs and was now being threatened by men with badges and guns, Jack felt something stir that he'd thought was dead. Not his fight, not his town. Except Titan had shifted on the examination table, pressing his head against Dr. Voss's hand with surprising gentleness. The dog's amber eyes looked up at Jack, and in that gaze was a question more eloquent than words. "How much do you charge for the examination?" Jack asked. Dr. Moss blinked at the apparent subject change. $40, but for military veterans, I don't charge anything. Then I'm paying $80. Jack pulled bills from his wallet and set them on the counter. The extra $40 is for the consultation. You just gave me information that could be valuable. Mr. Mercer. Jack, she corrected. I'm not asking you to get involved. Lord knows you've probably dealt with enough trouble without taking on mine. I needed to tell someone. Someone who wouldn't either laugh at me or run to Hutchins with everything I said. Jack lifted Titan down from the table. The dog immediately moved to Dr. Voss and sat beside her, leaning slightly against her leg, a gesture of comfort and protection that Titan reserved only for those he deemed worthy. I live 8 miles north, Jack said, the old Brennan cabin. You have a phone? She nodded. If anything happens, anything at all that makes you uncomfortable, you call me. Day or night. I'll give you my number. He wrote it on a piece of paper from the counter and handed it to her. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding that didn't require words. They'll come back, Dr. Voss said quietly. I know. And when they do, it won't be to talk. I know that too. She looked down at Titan, then back to Jack. Why would you risk yourself for someone you barely know? Jack headed for the door, Titan falling into heel position automatically. He paused at the threshold, looking back. Because someone shot your dogs, ma'am. And because men like Hutchins only keep pushing until someone pushes back. He and Titan walked out into the cold November afternoon. The sky had darkened, heavy clouds rolling in from the west, promising snow before morning. Jack loaded Titan into the truck and sat behind the wheel, but didn't immediately start the engine. His hands were steady on the wheel, but something coiled tight in his chest. The old familiar feeling that preceded operations, that electric awareness that came from knowing violence was approaching and preparation was everything. Not his fight, not his town. He started the engine. The cabin was dark when they arrived, exactly as Jack had left it. He went through his usual entry protocol anyway, checking the perimeter for footprints, looking for signs of disturbance, ensuring no one had visited during his absence. The structure was small, one main room serving as kitchen and living area, a bedroom barely large enough for a bed, a bathroom with plumbing that groaned but functioned. Furniture was minimal and utilitarian, no decorations, no photographs, nothing personal that might suggest permanence. Jack built a fire in the wood stove and prepared dinner. Freeze-dried camping meals, rehydrated with boiling water for himself, high-quality kibble for Titan. They ate in silence, the only sounds the crackling fire and wind against the walls. Afterward, Jack sat in the single chair near the window, looking out at the darkness beneath the trees. Titan lay at his feet, head resting on paws, but ears alert, monitoring the night. Hours passed. Jack didn't move to sleep. His mind worked through scenarios, assessing threats, calculating responses. The men in the clinic had been escalating, that much was obvious. Poisoning the dogs was a deliberate step beyond intimidation toward direct harm. The next move would be worse. Around midnight, Titan's head lifted, his ears swiveled forward, body going rigid. Jack's hand moved to the rifle leaning against the wall beside his chair. A Daniel Defense M4 carbine, suppressor attached. Loaded magazine locked in place. Through the window he saw nothing but darkness and falling snow. Then, distant but distinct, a sound carried through the forest. A dog barking, multiple dogs. And underneath that, something that might have been a scream. Coming from the direction of town, from the direction of the clinic. Jack was moving before conscious thought finished processing the information. He grabbed the rifle, shrugged into his tactical vest, and hit the door with Titan exploding into the night beside him. The truck roared to life. Gravel sprayed as Jack accelerated hard, the vehicle fishtailing slightly on the snow-dusted road before the tires found purchase. 8 miles had never felt longer. The truck's headlights cut through falling snow, illuminating a tunnel of white against the darkness. Jack pushed the Ford hard, but the deteriorating road conditions forced restraint. Sliding off into the trees would help no one. Beside him, Titan stood braced against the passenger door, body tense, a low rumble building in his chest that Jack felt more than heard. 6 minutes from the cabin to town. Another 2 to reach the clinic's access road. 8 minutes that felt like hours while Jack's mind cataloged equipment and calculated tactical approaches for scenarios he couldn't yet see. The rifle between the seats, Glock on his hip, 2 spare magazines for each, tactical vest with plate carrier, medical kit in the back. Titan, trained for combat operations, injured but operational. Against an unknown number of hostiles with unknown weapons and unknown intent. The math wasn't good, but Jack had operated on worse odds. The clinic appeared ahead, and Jack killed the headlights, letting the truck coast the last 100 yards on momentum and parking lights alone. What he saw made his jaw tighten. Dr. Voss's Subaru sat where it had been that afternoon, but now the windshield was shattered, driver's side door hanging open. The clinic's front windows were dark, except for a flashlight beam moving inside. The silver pickup truck from earlier was parked at an angle, blocking the entrance, and 3 figures moved in the yard. Dark shapes against snow-covered ground, their attention focused on something near the clinic's side door. Jack stopped the truck 50 yards out, concealed by trees at the property's edge. He killed the engine and sat for 5 seconds, breathing controlled, letting his vision adjust fully to darkness and assessing the tactical picture. 3 hostiles visible outside, at least 1 inside based on the flashlight. Probably the same crew from the afternoon, the 2 civilians and possibly Sheriff Hutchins, though the Tahoe wasn't present. They were focused on the building, not expecting interference, which gave Jack the initiative. Dr. Voss's location was unknown. Best case, barricaded inside. Worst case, already injured or worse. The barking he'd heard from the cabin had stopped. That silence worried him more than the noise had. Jack opened his door carefully, minimizing sound. Titan was out instantly, a shadow merging with other shadows. Jack followed, rifle up, moving in the low tactical crouch that had become second nature across a dozen countries. Snow crunched softly under his boots despite his care. Unavoidable. But the wind masked the sound. He circled wide, using the trees for concealment, Titan ghosting along at his left side. As they moved closer, voices became audible. "Told you she'd barricade herself." Male voice, frustrated. "So, we go through the window. Hutchins wants this finished tonight." Different voice, harder. "What about the dogs?" "Already handled, she's alone in there." Jack's finger moved to his rifle's safety, clicking it off. 20 yards now. The 3 men were clustered near the side door. The 2 from the afternoon plus a third Jack didn't recognize. The one with the shaved head held a crowbar. The blonde one had what looked like a gasoline can. The third man, older and heavier, carried a baseball bat. Gasoline. They were planning to burn her out, or just burn it all. Jack's breath came controlled and steady, despite the rage building behind his sternum. He'd seen this before, the escalation from intimidation to property destruction to murder, all following the same predictable pattern of men who'd forgotten that actions had consequences. He moved closer. 15 yards. The men's attention remained fixed on forcing the door. Metal scraped against wood as the crowbar bit into the frame. 10 yards. Titan sensed the shift in Jack's intention and sank lower, muscles coiling. Jack's voice cut through the night, calm and clear. Put down the tools and step away from the building. All three men spun, the motion clumsy with surprise. The one with the bat recovered first, raising it as he took a step forward. Who the hell? He stopped when his eyes adjusted enough to see Jack clearly. Tactical vest, rifle aimed center mass, the complete stillness of someone who'd made this shot 1,000 times. I said put them down. The blonde one's hand moved toward his waistband. You're that guy from this afternoon. You're making a serious mistake, friend. Last warning. Jack's voice dropped lower. Hands where I can see them, tools on the ground, do it now. For a moment, the tableau held. 3 men weighing odds, calculating whether the lone figure with the rifle was bluffing or truly willing to fire. Jack saw the decision crystallize in the blonde man's eyes a half-second before he moved. The blonde's hand darted to his concealed weapon. Jack's rifle barked once, suppressed, but still loud in the cold air. A warning shot that kicked up snow 6 inches from the man's feet. The blonde froze. Next one center mass, Jack said. Your choice. The crowbar hit the snow. Then the bat. The gasoline can followed. Hands on your heads. Interlock your fingers. Knees. They complied, moving with the jerky motions of men whose bravado had evaporated. Jack moved forward, Titan advancing with him. The dog's attention laser-focused on the 3 kneeling figures. Jack was 3 steps away when the clinic's side door exploded outward. The fourth man, the one who'd been inside, came through hard and fast, a tire iron raised high. He'd been waiting, listening, and now he swung for Jack's head with the full force of desperation and surprise. Jack twisted, bringing the rifle up to block. Metal rang against metal. The impact sent jolts through his arms, but his grip held. The attacker followed through, using his momentum to crash into Jack's chest, and both men went down hard into the snow. The rifle was trapped between them, useless. Jack released it, and his hand flashed to the knife on his vest. The attacker saw the motion and grabbed Jack's wrist, his other hand clawing for Jack's throat. They rolled, each fighting for advantage, snow flying. Then 95 pounds of trained aggression. Jan hit the attacker like a missile. Titan's jaws clamped onto the man's right forearm, not the killing bite to the throat the dog was trained to deliver, but a controlling hold that made the man scream and release Jack immediately. The attacker tried to pull away, which only made Titan's grip tighten, teeth finding purchase through the heavy jacket. Jack rolled to his feet, drawing the Glock in one smooth motion. Titan, out. The dog released instantly and backed 3 steps, positioning himself between Jack and the man riding in the snow, clutching his bleeding arm. The 3 kneeling men had started to rise during the chaos. They froze when Jack's pistol tracked across them. Don't. One word. Absolutely flat. They sank back down. Jack's eyes never left them as he called out. Dr. Voss, it's Jack Mercer. Are you safe? Silence from the dark clinic. Then, tentatively. Jack? Yes, ma'am. Stay inside until I tell you it's clear. He moved to each of the kneeling men in turn, removing weapons, 2 9mm Glocks and a snub-nose revolver. He threw them into the trees, far enough that retrieving them in darkness would be impossible. Then he zip-tied their hands behind their backs with restraints from his vest, working with efficient speed. The fourth man, still clutching his bleeding arm, received the same treatment. You're done, Jack said quietly as he secured the last restraint. All of you, this ends tonight. The blonde one spat blood. He'd bitten his tongue when Jack's warning shot startled him. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Highland will bury you. The sheriff will bury you. You just signed your own death warrant. Jack crouched in front of him, close enough that the man could see his eyes clearly in the ambient light. I'm a Navy SEAL with 12 years of combat experience across 3 theaters. I've been shot at by people significantly more dangerous than Marcus Highland. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything about Highland's operation. Every detail, every crime, every victim. And if you're very cooperative and very lucky, you might avoid federal charges for attempted murder and arson. I'm not telling you anything without a lawyer. Jack stood and turned to the man with the shaved head, the one who'd been holding the crowbar. How about you? The man's eyes shifted between his companions and Jack. Fear worked across his face. We were just supposed to scare her, that's all. Just make enough noise that she'd agree to sell. With gasoline and a crowbar? That was Garrett's idea. He jerked his head toward the blonde man. He said Highland was losing patience, said we needed to send a message. What message? That nobody tells Marcus Highland no, not twice. Jack's jaw tightened. How many others, how many people has Highland done this to? The man hesitated. Titan growled, low and continuous, and the man's resolve crumbled. 3 others. 3 families over the past 2 years. They all sold eventually. Accidents happened, barn fires, equipment failures, vandalism. Things got expensive and dangerous until selling looked like the smart option. And the ones who still refused? Silence. Answer me. The man's voice dropped to barely a whisper. There was an old couple, the Hendersons. They had a ranch north of here. Refused to sell no matter what. There was a fire. They both died. The rage Jack had been containing crystallized into something cold and absolutely focused. You're telling me Marcus Highland murdered 2 people for their land? I didn't say that. The fire was ruled accidental. By Sheriff Hutchins. I want a lawyer. I'm not saying anything else. Jack pulled out his phone. No signal, as expected this far from town. He'd have to use the clinic's landline. He turned toward the building. Dr. Voss, I'm coming in. It's safe now. The door opened slowly. Dr. Voss stood in the threshold, a shotgun held in shaking hands, her face pale but composed. Her eyes swept across the 4 restrained men, then settled on Jack. You came. Her voice carried wonder and relief in equal measure. Yes, ma'am. Do you have a working phone inside? She nodded. I need to make some calls, and we're going to need medical supplies. That one. Jack gestured to the man Titan had bitten. Needs his arm looked at. Dr. Voss's expression hardened as she took in the gasoline can lying in the snow. They were going to burn my clinic. Yes, ma'am. With me inside. Yes, ma'am. She looked at the 4 men with something that transcended anger into a colder, more permanent contempt. Then she stepped back, holding the door open. Come inside, both of you. I'll treat the wounds because that's what I do. But these men are never stepping foot on my property again. Jack collected his rifle from the snow and moved toward the clinic, Titan at his heel. As he passed the blonde man, Garrett, Jack stopped. You made 3 mistakes tonight, he said quietly. First, you targeted someone who'd already lost everything except her principles, which meant she had nothing left to lose. Second, you assumed being outnumbered meant being stronger. And third, Jack looked down at Titan, who was watching Garrett with unblinking intensity. You threatened someone under my protection. He stepped over the threshold into warmth and light. Behind him, the 4 men remained kneeling in the snow, bleeding and bound, while the night grew colder, and the promised storm finally arrived in earnest. Inside the clinic, Dr. Voss set down the shotgun with shaking hands. Jack noticed for the first time the bruise forming on her left cheek, the torn sleeve of her shirt, the way she held herself as if every breath hurt. What happened? He asked. They came an hour ago, broke through the back window. I managed to get the dogs into the kennel runs and barricade myself in the surgery. They were trying to break down the door when you arrived. She met his eyes. We saved my life tonight, and now we're going to make sure nobody ever threatens it again. Jack moved to the phone on the wall. I need to make 2 calls. First to someone who can secure these men. Second, to someone who can bring down Marcus Highland's entire operation. Who? Jack began dialing a number he'd memorized years ago and never forgotten. The FBI. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered, rough with sleep and annoyance. This better be important. Do you know what time it is? Tom, it's Jack Mercer. Silence. Then, Jack? Jesus, I haven't heard from you since Walter Reed. How are you? I need a favor. FBI jurisdiction, possible multiple homicides covered up as accidents, land fraud, corruption of local law enforcement. Montana. The sleep vanished from Tom Chen's voice instantly, replaced by sharp focus. Talk to me. Jack spent the next 10 minutes laying out everything. Dr. Moss's situation, the 4 restrained men outside, the confession about the Hendersons, the pattern of intimidation and violence stretching back 2 years. Tom listened without interrupting, and Jack could hear the scratch of pen on paper as his former teammate took notes. Tom Chen had been part of Jack's SEAL team for 6 years before a knee injury ended his operational career. He'd transitioned to the FBI's Critical Incident Response Group, bringing the same intensity and competence he'd shown in combat to investigating domestic threats. If anyone could mobilize federal resources quickly, it was Tom. "You're certain about the murders?" Tom asked when Jack finished. "I have a confession from one of the attackers. He admitted Marcus Hyland's operation has targeted multiple properties and that an elderly couple died in a fire after refusing to sell. The local sheriff ruled it accidental. Sheriff's name, Dale Hutchins. Pine Haven, Montana. He's on Hyland's payroll." More scratching of pen. "Okay, I can have agents there by morning, but Jack, you need to secure the scene and the witnesses. If Hyland has the local law bought, he'll know something went wrong when his crew doesn't report back. He might run." "I'm not letting that happen. Jack." Tom's voice carried warning. "You're a civilian now. Let us handle this through proper channels." "These men tried to burn a veterinarian alive in her own clinic tonight, Tom. They've already killed 2 people that we know about. Proper channels take time, and time gives Hyland opportunity to destroy evidence or disappear." "What are you planning?" Jack looked at Dr. Voss, who was methodically laying out medical supplies on the examination table while keeping the shotgun within arm's reach. "I'm planning to make sure everyone involved stays exactly where they are until your agents arrive, and I'm planning to get evidence that will put Hyland away for the rest of his life." Tom sighed. "You're going to do something stupid, aren't you?" "Probably." "Jack, how long until your people get here?" 8 hours minimum. We're talking remote Montana in a snowstorm. Could be longer." "Then I need to keep these 4 secured for 8 hours and make sure Hyland doesn't run. I'll call you back in 6 hours with an update." "Jack, wait." Jack hung up and turned to Dr. Voss. "Federal agents are coming, but we need to hold things together until they arrive. First priority is medical care, then securing the prisoners, then fortifying this location in case Hyland sends more people." Dr. Voss nodded, her veterinary training overriding her fear as she slipped into professional mode. "Bring the injured one inside. I'll treat him here where I have proper supplies and lighting." Jack stepped back outside into the snow. The 4 men had shifted positions slightly, trying to find comfort in an uncomfortable situation. The temperature had dropped further, and the storm was intensifying, thick flakes falling fast enough to blur visibility beyond 20 yards. Jack hauled Garrett to his feet by his zip-tied wrists. "Inside, Dr. Voss is going to treat your arm. You try anything. My dog will finish what he started. Clear?" Garrett nodded, his earlier bravado completely extinguished. Inside, Dr. Moss directed him to sit on the examination table. She cut away his sleeve with surgical scissors, revealing the bite marks, deep punctures that had bled considerably but weren't life-threatening. She cleaned the wounds with professional efficiency, her movements precise despite her hands still trembling slightly. "You'll need antibiotics," she said, not looking at Garrett's face. "And a tetanus shot. This will scar, but you'll keep the arm." "Thanks," Garrett muttered. Dr. Voss's hands stopped moving. She looked at him directly for the first time, and her voice when she spoke was colder than the storm outside. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I took an oath to heal. But understand something. You came to my home tonight planning to kill me. You poured gasoline with the intent to burn everything I've built over 30 years. So don't thank me. Just be grateful that I'm a better person than you are." Garrett said nothing. Jack watched from near the window, tightened beside him, while Dr. Voss finished the treatment. Outside, the other 3 men remained in the snow. Jack's tactical assessment said they needed to be moved before hypothermia became a factor, but he wasn't about to bring them into Dr. Voss's living space. "Is there a secure area where we can keep them?" he asked. "Somewhere with heat, but that can be locked?" Dr. Voss pointed toward a door at the back of the clinic. "The large animal treatment room. It's got radiant floor heating and only one entrance. There are tie rings bolted to the walls for restraining horses during treatment. It would hold them." Jack nodded. Over the next 20 minutes, he moved all 4 prisoners into the treatment room, securing each man's zip-tied wrists to the heavy steel rings with additional restraints. They could sit or lie down, but couldn't reach each other or the door. He left them with blankets, but nothing they could use as weapons. Before closing the door, Jack addressed them. "Federal agents are coming. Your cooperation from this point forward will determine whether you're charged as accessories to attempted murder or as co-conspirators in a pattern of violence, including 2 homicides. I suggest you think carefully about what you're willing to testify to." He locked the door and pocketed the key. Back in the main clinic area, Dr. Voss had made coffee. She poured 2 cups and handed one to Jack, her hands steadier now that immediate danger had passed. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sounds the wind against the windows and the quiet ticking of a clock on the wall. "What happens now?" Dr. Voss asked. "Now we wait for the FBI. But first, I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." Jack pulled out a small notebook from his vest. "Tell me everything you know about Marcus Hyland, his business, his connections, how he operates. Every detail matters." Dr. Voss wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. Gathering her thoughts, Marcus Hyland built his fortune developing luxury resorts in remote mountain locations. He targets areas with natural beauty near national forests, places where wealthy people want to escape without actually roughing it. His developments are massive: 300-room hotels, spas, golf courses, private airstrips. How does he acquire the land? He identifies promising locations, then systematically buys every parcel in the area through shell companies so property owners don't realize they're selling to the same buyer. When he encounters resistance, he escalates. Lawsuits claiming easement rights or environmental violations. Ons pressure through local government. And when that doesn't work, she gestured around the damaged clinic. "This," Jack made notes. "The 4 men outside, are they Hyland's regular crew?" "Garrett Simmons runs Hyland's security. The others work for him, but they're not the top of the chain. Hyland has lawyers, politicians, businessmen, all bought and paid for. Sheriff Hutchins is just one piece." "What about evidence? Documents, recordings, anything that proves Hyland ordered these attacks?" Dr. Voss shook her head. "He's careful. Everything's verbal or through intermediaries. I've never even met Marcus Hyland face to face. It's always Garrett delivering messages or Hutchins making threats." Jack stood and moved to the window, looking out at the storm. Strategic problem. Hyland was insulated by layers of deniability. Garrett and his crew could be prosecuted for tonight's attack, but connecting it definitively to Hyland would require testimony from people whose credibility a defense attorney would shred. His phone buzzed, a text message that had finally pushed through the spotty signal. From Tom. "Need to know. Are you planning what I think you're planning?" Jack typed back. "Define what you think I'm planning." "Going after Hyland directly." "Jack, don't. Let us build the case." "Cases take months. He'll run or destroy evidence. Then we'll find him." "You're not a federal agent. Anything you obtain illegally is inadmissible." Jack considered that. Tom was right from a legal standpoint. But legal standpoints didn't mean much to people burned alive in their homes or terrorized in their own clinics. Another text. "Promise me you won't do anything stupid before we arrive." Jack typed. "I promise I won't do anything stupid." He paused, then added, "I might do something dangerous, though. There's a difference." He pocketed the phone before Tom could respond. Dr. Voss was watching him. "You're going after Hyland yourself, aren't you?" "The FBI needs evidence. I'm going to get it." "How?" Jack turned from the window. "Hyland will know something went wrong when Garrett doesn't report back. He'll either run or send more people. Either way, he'll make contact, probably with Sheriff Hutchins first. If I can intercept that communication and get Hyland talking, on record, about his operation." "That's insane. You're one person." Jack looked down at Titan, who gazed back with calm intelligence. 2. Dr. Voss stood, her earlier fear replaced with something harder. Then 3. "This is my fight too. I'm not sitting here waiting while you risk your life." Dr. Voss. "Eleanor. And before you tell me I'd be a liability, remember that I've lived in this county for 30 years. I know every back road, every property owner, every person Hyland has threatened or bought. You need that knowledge." Jack studied her, 62 years old, bruised and exhausted, but standing straight with absolute determination in her eyes. She reminded him of operators he'd served with, the ones who'd been through hell and come out hardened into something unbreakable. "Can you shoot?" he asked. "My husband taught me. I'm not military trained, but I can hit what I aim at." Jack made his decision. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. We wait for full light, another 4 hours. Use that time to rest and prepare. When dawn comes, we're going to Highland's location. We're going to get him talking, and we're going to record everything. By the time the FBI arrives, we'll hand them a case so airtight that Highland spends the rest of his life in federal prison." "Where is Highland now?" "That's what we need to find out." Jack moved to the clinic's computer. "Can I use this?" Eleanor nodded. "Internet's slow, but it works." Jack began searching, pulling up property records, business registrations, satellite imagery. After 20 minutes, he found it. A luxury compound registered to one of Highland's shell companies, located 15 miles south in the mountains. The satellite photos showed a main house, several outbuildings, and a private road with a security gate. "That's it," Eleanor confirmed, looking over his shoulder. "I've driven past the entrance. Armed guards, cameras, the works." He's usually there in person when he's working on the Pinehaven project. Jack memorized the approach routes, noting topography and potential surveillance positions. The compound was isolated, easily defended, but that isolation also meant reinforcements couldn't arrive quickly if things went wrong. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Tom. "Jack, seriously, stand down, we'll handle this." Jack didn't respond. Tom was a good agent and a better friend, but he'd never understand that some battles couldn't wait for proper procedure. The Hendersons hadn't had time. Neither had Eleanor, nearly. Outside, the storm continued to build. Snow was accumulating fast, already 6 inches, with more falling. The roads would be treacherous by dawn. Good. That meant Highland's security would be hampered too, and anyone he sent as reinforcement would move slowly. Jack checked his weapons, inventoried his ammunition, and began planning the operation with the same methodical precision he'd brought to 100 missions across 3 combat theaters. Beside him, Titan settled onto the floor, head on pause but eyes open, resting but ready. Eleanor watched both of them with an expression Jack couldn't quite read. Finally she spoke. "Why are you doing this, really? You don't owe me anything." Jack was quiet for a long moment. 8 months ago, I was extracted from Afghanistan after my entire team got hit by an IED. 6 men died. Titan and I survived because we'd ranged ahead to scout. I spent 3 months in hospitals being told I should feel lucky to be alive. He looked down at the dog. But luck isn't the same as purpose. I came here trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do now that the war's over. Tonight, watching men try to burn you alive, I remembered something I'd forgotten. What's that? That the most important battles aren't always overseas. Sometimes they're right here, protecting people who can't protect themselves, from people who think power means they can do whatever they want without consequences. He met her eyes. "You asked why I'm doing this. Because I'm a weapon, Eleanor. And weapons are only as good or evil as who wields them and what they're pointed at. Tonight, I choose to point myself at Marcus Highland." Dawn came gray and bitter. The storm having dumped 14 inches of snow overnight and showing no signs of stopping. Jack stood at the clinic window, watching the world turn white, his body running on the kind of alertness that came from years of operations where sleep was a luxury and vigilance meant survival. He dozed in 1-hour intervals throughout the night, Titan waking him each time with a soft whine when his cycle ended. The dog's internal clock as reliable as any alarm. Eleanor had slept for 3 hours on the couch in her attached residence, the shotgun across her lap, waking twice when the wind rattled windows and sent her bolt upright with fear etched across her face. Jack recognized that look. He'd worn it himself enough times. The 4 prisoners had spent an uncomfortable night, zip-tied to the treatment room rings, complaining periodically about the cold and their restraints until Jack informed them that hypothermia wasn't actually a concern at the current temperature, and that their discomfort was minimal compared to what they'd planned for Eleanor. After that, they'd been quiet. Now, as weak light filtered through the storm, Jack prepared for the next phase with the same methodical precision he brought to combat operations. He field-stripped and cleaned both the rifle and pistol, checked every magazine, inventoried his remaining zip ties and medical supplies. Eleanor watched from the doorway, coffee cup in hand, her exhaustion visible but her resolve unchanged. "The roads will be bad," she said. "4-wheel drive, snow tires, and even then it's dangerous." "Good. That works in our favor. Highlands people won't expect anyone to move in this weather. His compound has generators. He won't lose power even if the grid goes down. Jack nodded, absorbing the information. Security personnel? I've seen at least 4 guards when I've driven past. Private security types. They carry openly. Cameras? At the gate and along the main drive. I don't know about the house itself. Jack pulled up the satellite imagery again on the clinic computer, studying the compound's layout with fresh eyes. The main house sat at the center of a cleared area. Approximately 8,000 square feet based on the footprint. 2 smaller structures flanked it, probably guest houses or staff quarters. A garage large enough for 6 vehicles. The private road leading in was a 1/4 mile long, winding through dense forest that would provide concealment for approach, but also potential ambush positions. The tactical problem was clear: getting past the gate and security without triggering an alarm that would give Highland time to destroy evidence or escape. A frontal approach was suicide, which meant they needed to be creative. The property backs up to National Forest, Jack observed, tracing the boundary line on the map. No fencing on that side? Eleanor moved closer, studying the screen. Not that I know of. Forest Service land can't be fenced without permits. And Highland's been fighting with them about access easements. He wants to control who can use the hiking trails that cross near his property. So, we can approach from the forest side, bypass the gate entirely. In 14 inches of snow, with more falling? That's at least 2 miles of hiking through rough terrain. Jack looked at Titan, who raised his head alertly at the attention. We've done worse. Eleanor set down her coffee cup with a definitive click. Then we'd better get moving. It's a 30-minute drive to the forest access road in good conditions. Today, it'll take an hour. You're staying here. Like hell I am. Jack turned to face her fully. Eleanor, what I'm about to do isn't legal entry. Anything we find might not be admissible in court. You're a respected member of this community with everything to lose. I'm already outside the system. Let me take the risk. And what happens if you get inside and can't find what you need? You don't know Highland's voice, his mannerisms, how he operates. I've listened to his threats secondhand for 6 months. I know how he talks, what matters to him. She met Jack's eyes without flinching. Besides, you might be comfortable breaking into a compound alone, but you'll need someone to watch your back and Titans if things go wrong. I'm coming. Jack recognized the futility of arguing. He'd seen that same determination in operators who'd made decisions that wouldn't be unmade. Can you handle a lawn hike in snow? I've been treating livestock on mountain ranches for 30 years. I can handle it. Then we move in 20 minutes. Dress warm, multiple layers, bring water and high-calorie food. We might be out there for hours. While Eleanor prepared, Jack checked the prisoners one final time. Garrett was awake, watching with calculating eyes as Jack entered the treatment room. You're making a mistake, Garrett said. Whatever you're planning, it won't work. Highland has resources you can't imagine. Lawyers, politicians, people who can make you disappear. Jack crouched to Garrett's eye level. Here's what's going to happen. Federal agents arrive here in approximately 6 hours. When they do, they're going to ask you questions. Your answers will determine whether you're charged as muscle who followed orders or as an accomplice to multiple homicides. Think very carefully about which side of that line you want to be on. I want a lawyer. You'll get one. But understand something. The Hendersons burned to death because of Highland's hoarders. You were part of the operation that made that possible. You came here last night with gasoline. How do you think a jury's going to see that pattern? Something flickered in Garrett's eyes, fear maybe, or the first crack in his loyalty. I didn't kill anyone. But you knew. You knew what happened to the Hendersons, and you still followed orders to do the same thing to Dr. Voss. Garrett looked away. Jack stood. Federal agents will take your statement. I suggest you tell them everything. Names, dates, operations. It's your only chance at a deal. He left before Garrett could respond. Outside, Eleanor had transformed into something more tactical. Heavy winter gear, insulated boots, a backpack loaded with supplies. She'd pulled her gray hair back tight and wore a determined expression that aged her face but strengthened it too. Jack loaded equipment into his truck, the rifle in a case, pistol concealed, Titan's tactical vest with its built-in camera that could record audio and video. The dog accepted the vest with patient tolerance, understanding it meant work. The drive south was treacherous exactly as Eleanor had predicted. The truck's 4-wheel drive kept them moving, but barely. Twice they passed vehicles that had slid off into ditches, abandoned until plows could clear the roads. The world was nothing but white and gray, visibility reduced to 50 feet, the storm swallowing everything beyond that radius. Eleanor navigated from memory, directing Jack down progressively smaller roads until they reached what was barely more than a Forest Service track leading into the wilderness. Jack parked the truck a quarter-mile in, positioning it behind a stand of pines where it wouldn't be visible from the main road. They geared up in silence. Jack shouldered his pack and rifle case, keeping the pistol accessible at his hip. Eleanor carried the shotgun broken down in her pack, along with shells she'd loaded herself. Buckshot at close range was devastating even without military training. Titan shook himself, scattering snow, then looked at Jack with the focused attention that meant he was ready. The hike began. Snow crunched under their boots, each step requiring effort as they broke trail through powder that reached mid-shin. The forest was utterly silent except for the sound of their passage and the whisper of falling snow through pine branches. Jack led, using a handheld GPS unit to navigate toward Highland's compound, with Eleanor following in his footsteps to conserve energy. Titan ranged ahead and to the sides, his dark form ghosting through the trees, scouting for threats. 2 miles cross-country became 3 miles of actual hiking across terrain that rose and fell in steep ridges. Jack's leg muscles burned, his breathing controlled but labored. Behind him, Eleanor kept pace without complaint, though he could hear her breathing growing heavier. They paused twice to rest and hydrate, standing among the pines while their heart rates settled. After 90 minutes, Titan froze mid-step, one paw raised, entire body rigid. Jack's hand went to his pistol instantly. He moved forward in a crouch, scanning the forest ahead. Through the snow and trees, a structure became visible, one of the compound's outbuildings, maybe 200 yards distant. They'd reached the property boundary. Jack signaled Eleanor to stay low and moved forward with Titan, using the heavy timber for concealment. As they got closer, details emerged. The outbuilding was a large garage, doors closed, no vehicles visible outside, but lights showed in windows and smoke rose from a chimney. Someone was inside, probably security staying warm during the storm. Jack pulled out a small set of binoculars and glassed the main house beyond the garage. The structure was even more impressive up close. Heavy timber and stone construction, floor-to-ceiling windows, multiple levels built into the mountainside. Several vehicles were parked near the front entrance. 2 black SUVs, a Mercedes sedan, and Sheriff Hutchins's unmistakable Tahoe. Jack's jaw tightened. Hutchins was here, which meant Highland definitely knew something had gone wrong at Eleanor's clinic, and they were planning their response. He retreated to where Eleanor waited and showed her what he'd seen. Hutchins is inside with Highland. This is our chance to get them both on record. How do we get close enough to hear? Jack pulled out a small device from his pack, a parabolic microphone capable of picking up conversations through windows at 200 yards. Military-grade surveillance equipment he'd kept from his service days. We set up in the trees with sight lines to the main room. Titan's vest camera provides visual, while this captures audio. We get Highland talking about his operation, we get Hutchins confirming his involvement, and we have everything the FBI needs. They moved into position carefully, using the storm and terrain to mask their approach. Jack found a spot among dense pines that offered clear view of the house's main floor through large windows. He could see movement inside, figures moving between rooms, the flicker of a fireplace. He set up the parabolic microphone on a small tripod, aimed it at the windows, and connected it to a digital recorder. Titan lay beside him, the camera in his vest positioned to capture video of the house. Eleanor crouched nearby, the shotgun assembled now and held ready. Then they waited. Voices came through the microphone, tinny but clear. Jack adjusted the gain, filtering out wind noise and static. Male voices, at least 3 distinct speakers. Completely blown, 4 men, all captured. Mercer has them at the clinic, and by now he's probably called in federal backup. That was Hutchins, his voice tight with stress. Who the hell is Mercer? Different voice, older, carrying authority, probably Highland. The vet said he's former military, special forces, maybe SEALs, based on how he operated. Took down Garrett and 3 others like it was nothing. He's got training, Marcus. Serious training. One man. Highland's voice dripped contempt. You're telling me one man disrupted an entire operation. One man with a military working dog and apparently no hesitation about using force. Garrett's in custody. If he talks, Garrett won't talk. He knows what happens to people who talk. The words hung in the cold air, captured perfectly on digital recorder. Jack's finger hovered over the record button, making sure every word was preserved. Hutchins spoke again. We need to shut this down. Clean house, destroy the evidence, and get out before the feds arise. I can stall them, claim jurisdiction issues, but not for long. I've spent 2 years assembling this project, Dale. 15 million invested. I'm not walking away because of one veterinarian and some wannabe hero. Marcus, listen to me. If Mercer has Garrett, he has testimony about the Hendersons, about the others. That's conspiracy to commit murder. Federal conspiracy charges don't have a statute of limitations. We need to eliminate the problem. Highland's voice had gone cold. Mercer, the vet, anyone who can testify, burn the clinic. Make it look like an accident from the damage last night. No witnesses, no case. Jack's hands tightened on the microphone controls. Beside him, Eleanor had gone perfectly still, her face pale. You're talking about murder. Hutchins sounded shaken. Marcus, I signed up to look the other way on property deals. Not, you signed up for whatever I tell you to sign up for. I own you, Dale. Every payment, every favor, every time you've abused your authority on my orders, it's all documented. You think you can walk away now? You're in this until it's finished. Then how do we finish it? I have people coming. Real professionals, not the amateurs Garrett hired. They'll handle Mercer and the vet, clean up the mess, and by tomorrow, this whole situation will be resolved. A pause. And Dale, you're going with them. You started this by not scaring the old woman off 6 months ago. You get to help finish it. The recording ran on. Jack had everything he needed: conspiracy to commit murder, admission of past crimes, confirmation of corruption. It was more than enough for federal prosecution, but it also meant Eleanor's life was in immediate danger. Highland was sending killers to the clinic right now. Jack caught Eleanor's eye and gestured. We need to move, now. They broke down the surveillance equipment quickly, packing everything with practiced efficiency. Then they started back through the forest, moving faster now, despite the deep snow, driven by urgency. They were a quarter mile into the hike when Titan stopped again, different this time, not alerting to a static threat, but to approaching movement. Jack signaled Eleanor to freeze. Through the trees, coming from the direction of the access road, he heard engines. Multiple vehicles, moving slowly through the snow. Highland's professionals were already on their way. Jack's tactical assessment ran in microseconds. 2 vehicles minimum based on the engine sounds, probably 4 to 6 hostiles total, armed and trained if Highland was sending professionals. They were heading toward the clinic, where 4 restrained prisoners waited defenseless, where evidence of the night's attack remained scattered across the property, where federal agents would eventually arrive expecting secured witnesses. The professionals would eliminate everyone, burn everything, and disappear before the FBI could respond. Unless Jack stopped them first. He turned to Eleanor, his voice barely above a whisper. Give me your keys. Take Titan and the recordings and get to the main road. Flag down anyone you see, state troopers, Forest Service, anyone. Tell them there's an active shooter situation at your clinic and federal agents are en route. Do not go back to the clinic. Understand? Eleanor's eyes widened. What are you going to do? What I was trained to do. Jack pulled the rifle case from his pack and began assembling the weapon with practiced speed. Those men are going to kill everyone at your clinic. I can't let that happen. You can't fight 6 trained killers alone. I've done it before, and I won't be alone. I'll have surprise, superior positioning, and the fact that they're not expecting resistance. He finished assembling the rifle and chambered around. Eleanor, I need you to trust me. Get those recordings to safety. They're the only proof we have. If I don't make it out, make sure the FBI gets them. Jack, go, now. Eleanor looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Jack's face stopped her. She'd seen that expression before, probably in her late husband, the look of a warrior who'd made his decision and wouldn't be swayed. She took the digital recorder from Jack's pack, whistled softly to Titan, and started moving through the trees toward where they'd left the truck. Jack watched until they disappeared into the storm, then turned his attention back to the approaching vehicles. He had maybe 5 minutes before they reached the clinic. 5 minutes to get into position and turn this from an execution into an ambush. He moved fast, circling through the forest to intercept the road between Highland's compound and the clinic. The terrain gave him options: a ridge overlooking the road where he could set up with elevation advantage, clear sight lines, and multiple retreat routes if things went wrong. He reached the position with 2 minutes to spare and went prone in the snow behind a fallen log, the rifle's bipod deployed, scope to his eye. The road below was barely visible through the storm, a narrow strip of white winding through dark trees. Then headlights appeared. 2 vehicles moving slowly, both heavy-duty trucks modified for mountain terrain, lifted suspensions, aggressive tires. The lead vehicle was a Ford F-250, matte black. The second was a Chevy Silverado, dark gray. Both had tinted windows hiding the occupants. Jack's breathing slowed, his heart rate dropping into the controlled rhythm that came from muscle memory. His finger rested alongside the trigger guard, not on it yet. Wait for the right moment. Wait for confirmation of hostile intent. The vehicles passed below him, close enough that he could hear gravel crunching under tires despite the snow muffling sound. They were 50 yards past his position when brake lights flared. Both trucks stopped. Jack's scope tracked them. Doors opened. 6 men climbed out, all wearing tactical gear, plate carriers, rifles slung across their chests, radios clipped to their vests. They moved with military precision, establishing security positions while one checked a handheld GPS unit. The GPS operator spoke, his voice carrying in the cold air. "Clinic's 3 miles ahead. We go in fast, 2-man teams. Primary targets are the vet and anyone else in the building. Collateral targets are the 4 in custody. Highland wants no witnesses. We burn the structure after extraction, make it look like the damage from last night's spread." Another voice, "What about the SEAL? Hutchins said he's trained." "1 man, probably asleep or off guard. We hit before he can react. Stack on the entry." Overwhelmed with numbers. 2 minutes in, 2 minutes out, then we're gone. They were discussing multiple homicides like it was a business transaction. Jack's finger moved to the trigger, but something stopped him. 6 trained men with body armor and automatic weapons. If he opened fire from this position, he might drop 2 before they identified his location and returned fire with overwhelming volume. The terrain gave him advantage, but not enough to guarantee success against those odds. He needed to separate them, reduce the numbers, create chaos that prevented coordinated response. Jack pulled back from the ridge and began moving through the trees parallel to the road, circling to get ahead of the vehicles. His mind calculated angles and timing. The road curved ahead, wrapping around a steep hillside with forest pressing close on both sides, a natural choke point. He reached the curve 3 minutes before the vehicles would, breathing hard from the sprint through deep snow. No time for sophisticated preparation. He needed something immediate and effective. Jack pulled out a small thermite grenade from his vest, military grade, capable of burning at 4,000 degrees, designed to destroy equipment beyond recovery. He'd kept 3 from his service days for emergencies. This qualified. He positioned himself in the trees above the curve, calculated the timing, and waited. The vehicles appeared, moving cautiously around the blind turn. Jack pulled the pin and threw the grenade, his motion smooth and practiced. It arced through the air and landed directly in front of the lead truck. 2 seconds later, it detonated. White-hot flame erupted across the road, molten metal splashing across the F-250's hood and windshield. The driver jerked the wheel instinctively, and the heavy truck slid sideways on the snow-covered surface, losing traction. It hit the embankment hard, the front quarter panel crumpling, engine dying. The Silverado behind it braked hard, but couldn't stop on the slick road. It crashed into the F-250's rear quarter with a metallic crunch, both vehicles now blocking the narrow road. Jack didn't wait to see the results. He was already moving, circling to a new position. Rifle up. Doors flew open. Men poured out, shouting, trying to establish what had happened. They thought it was an accident, a mechanical failure, maybe a roadside IED, but not an active ambush. Their formation was broken, half still in vehicles, half exposed on the road. Jack's scope found the first target, the GPS operator who'd outlined the murder plan, now standing beside the Silverado with his rifle coming up. Jack's shot took him center mass. The suppressed rifle coughed, snow muffling the sound further. The man dropped, before the others could react. Jack fired twice more, 2 more targets down, both clean shots to the chest. Now the formation broke completely. The remaining 3 scattered, diving for cover behind the vehicles, returning fire blindly into the trees. Bullets snapped through branches around Jack's position, but they were shooting at muzzle flash from his previous location. He'd already moved. Jack circled left, using the terrain and limited visibility to ghost between positions. The tactical situation had shifted dramatically. 3 hostiles remaining, pinned behind disabled vehicles in a kill zone, with an unseen attacker using precision fire from concealment. One of the remaining shooters made a decision. He broke from cover, sprinting toward the tree line to flank Jack's suspected position. It was the right tactical move, but it exposed him for 3 seconds. Jack's rifle barked once. The runner went down hard. 2 left. The survivors had stopped shooting, conserving ammunition, trying to identify their attacker's position. Jack could hear them communicating over radios in short professional bursts. They were trained, disciplined, not panicking despite losing 4 men in under a minute. Contact rear, single shooter, precision rifle, unknown position. Request immediate backup. A different voice responded through the radio, carrying authority. Negative on backup, abort mission, return to compound. But returning meant exposing themselves to cross 200 yards of open road, under fire from an elevated position. They were trapped. Jack moved closer, reducing the angle, making it harder for them to hide behind the vehicles. Through his scope, he could see them pressed against the Silverado's far side, weapons ready, scanning the trees. You have one chance. Jack's voice cut through the storm, loud and clear. Drop your weapons and show your hands. You're pinned. Your escape route is blocked, and I have unlimited ammunition and patience. Make the smart choice. Silence. Then, who are you? Someone who knows you just discussed murdering civilians in cold blood. Federal agents are 15 minutes out. You can surrender now and maybe negotiate a deal, or you can die right here in the snow. Your call. More silence. Jack could see them conferring, weighing options that all ended badly. Finally, rifles clattered onto the road. 2 sets of hands rose above the Silverado's roof. Step out slowly. Hands on your heads. Any fast movement and you're done. They complied, moving with the careful deliberation of men who knew they were in a sniper's crosshairs. Jack kept them covered as he approached, rifle never wavering. When he was close enough, he ordered them prone in the snow and zip-tied their hands behind their backs with the efficiency of someone who'd done it countless times. "Where's Highland?" Jack asked. Neither answered. Jack pressed his boot against one man's shoulder, applying pressure. "I asked you a question. Marcus Highland, where is he?" "Compound," the man gasped. "Still at the compound with the sheriff." "How many others?" "That was it. Just us 6 and the 4 from last night." Jack pulled out his phone. Still no signal this deep in the mountains. He'd have to move closer to the highway to contact Tom. But first, he needed to secure these 2 and check on the 4 wounded. 3 were dead, single shots through the chest that had defeated their body armor through precise placement. The 4th, the one Jack had shot while running, was alive but unconscious, bleeding from a shoulder wound. Jack applied a pressure bandage from his medical kit, stabilizing the injury. The man would live to stand trial. He dragged the 2 restrained prisoners to the side of the road and secured them to a tree, then did the same with the wounded one. They'd be cold and uncomfortable, but they'd survive until the FBI arrived. Jack was checking the last restraints when he heard an engine approaching from behind, from the direction of the clinic. His rifle came up instantly, training until the sound. Eleanor's Subaru appeared through the snow, moving carefully around the wrecked trucks. It stopped, and Eleanor climbed out, Titan leaping down beside her. "I thought I told you to get to the main road," Jack said. "I got there, made the calls. State police are responding. FBI knows the situation is active." She looked at the scene, disabled vehicles, bodies, restrained prisoners, without flinching. "I also realized you might need backup getting these people secured, and that leaving you alone after a firefight wasn't what my husband would have done for a brother in arms." Jack felt something loosen in his chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We still have a problem." Eleanor gestured back toward town. "While I was making calls, I heard Hutchins on his radio ordering units to the clinic. The prisoners there are still vulnerable, and if Highland realizes this team failed, he might run." Jack checked his watch. The FBI was still hours out. State police might be closer, but how many of them were on Highland's payroll? How deep did the corruption run? "We need to end this now," Jack said. before Highland can destroy evidence or escape. We has him on tape ordering murders. We have 6 mercenaries caught in the act. We have everything except Highland himself in custody. You want to go back to his compound. I want to finish what we started. You willing to help? Eleanor's jaw set hard. He tried to burn me alive. He murdered the Hendersons. He's terrorized this community for 2 years. Yes, I'm willing to help. Jack nodded. Then let's go get him. They loaded into Eleanor's Subaru, more maneuverable in snow than Jack's truck, and began the drive back toward Highland's compound. Titan sat in the back seat, alert and ready. Jack's rifle lay across his lap, fully loaded, with spare magazines within easy reach. The storm was finally beginning to break, clouds thinning enough to let gray light through. Visibility improved to 100 yards, then 200. The compound's entrance gate appeared ahead, closed, unmanned now that the security team was dead or restrained. Jack got out and approached on foot. The gate was electronic, requiring a code or remote. He could force it, but that would announce their arrival. Instead, he looked at the fence line, 8 feet high, chain link topped with razor wire, designed to keep out casual trespassers. Sussers, but not someone with training. He scaled it in seconds, dropped to the other side, and opened the gate from within. Eleanor drove through, and they approached the main house along the winding drive. 2 vehicles remained in front, Sheriff Hutchins's Tahoe and Highland's Mercedes. Lights showed in several windows, no external security visible, everyone having been sent to handle the clinic situation. Jack and Eleanor approached the front entrance. The door was solid timber. Expensive, probably reinforced. Jack tested the handle, locked. He could breach it, but that would give Highland and Hutchins time to respond. Back entrance? He asked Eleanor. She thought for a moment. Houses like this usually have service entrances for staff. Around the side, probably near the kitchen. They circled the structure, Titan moving silently beside them. The service entrance Eleanor predicted was there, a standard door with a simple lock. Jack had it open in 30 seconds with picks from his vest. They entered into warmth and luxury. Hardwood floors, stone walls, expensive furnishings. Voices echoed from somewhere deeper in the house. 2 men arguing, the words indistinct but the tension obvious. Jack moved forward with rifle raised, Eleanor behind him with the shotgun, Titan at point. They cleared rooms methodically, living room, dining room, study, until they reached a large office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley. Marcus Highland stood behind a massive desk, throwing papers into a fireplace where flames consumed them greedily. He was 51, but looked older. Silver hair perfectly styled even in crisis, wearing expensive casual clothes. His face carried the kind of confidence that came from 30 years of getting everything he wanted through money or intimidation. Sheriff Hutchins stood nearby, his uniform disheveled, his face pale. He held his service weapon, but it was pointed at the floor, his hand shaking. Both men looked up as Jack entered. Highland's expression cycled through surprise, recognition, and calculation. Hutchins went white. "Step away from the fireplace," Jack said quietly. "Both of you, hands where I can see them." Highland's gaze moved from Jack to Eleanor in the doorway, to Titan standing rigid with hackles raised. He had the look of a man reassessing a situation that had spiraled beyond his control. "You're Mercer," Highland said. "The SEAL. Hutchins said you were dangerous, but I didn't think you'd be stupid enough to break into my home. Put your hands on your head and turn around. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and about 15 other federal charges. The FBI is en route. You're done." Highland laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You're not law enforcement. You have no authority to arrest anyone, and everything you've obtained illegally will be thrown out in court. My lawyers will tear this apart." Jack stepped closer. "I have recordings of you ordering murders. I have 6 mercenaries you sent to kill civilians. I have Sheriff Hutchins standing right there who'll testify to everything to save his own skin. Your operation is over. Dale," Howland turned to the sheriff. Tell him how this ends." Hutchins didn't move. His weapon stayed pointed at the floor. "Dale," Highland's voice cracked with command. "Do your job. Arrest this man for breaking and entering, for assault, for—" "No," Hutchins said quietly. The word hung in the air. Highland's face darkened. "What did you say?" "I said no, Marcus. It's over. You heard him. The FBI is coming. Federal charges. There's no talking our way out of this one." Hutchins's voice shook. I'm not killing anyone else for you. I'm done. Highland's composure cracked, revealing something desperate beneath the polished surface. His hand moved toward the desk drawer with sudden speed, but Titan was faster. The dog surged forward with a snarl, 95 pounds of trained aggression covering the distance in 3 bounds. Highland jerked back, his hand abandoning whatever weapon he'd been reaching for. Titan, hold, Jack commanded. The dog stopped mid-lunge but remained between Highland and the desk, teeth bared, a continuous low growl rumbling from his chest. Jack moved forward and opened the drawer carefully. A Sig Sauer 9mm lay inside, loaded and ready. He cleared it and tucked it into his belt, then gestured for Highland to move away from the desk. Face the wall, hands behind your back. For a moment, Highland looked like he might refuse. His eyes darted to Hutchins, then to the windows, calculating escape routes that didn't exist. Finally, the reality of his situation seemed to penetrate. His shoulders sagged and he turned to face the stone wall. Jack zip-tied Highland's wrists with practiced efficiency, then did the same to Hutchins, who offered no resistance. The sheriff's service weapon went into Eleanor's hands. She held it awkwardly but safely, finger off the trigger, pointed at the floor. Sit, Jack ordered, gesturing to 2 chairs near the fireplace. Both men complied. Highland had recovered some of his composure, his face settling into an expression of cold calculation. You're making a terrible mistake. Do you have any idea who I am? The connections I have? Senators, federal judges, people who owe me favors that go back decades. I know exactly who you are, Jack said. You're a man who murdered an elderly couple for their land, who terrorized a 62-year-old widow, who sent armed men to burn people alive. Your connections won't help you anymore. Everything I did was legal business. Aggressive, perhaps, but legal. You have no proof otherwise. Jack pulled out the digital recorder, rewound to the relevant section, and pressed play. Highland's voice filled the room, crystal clear. I've spent 2 years assembling this project, Dale. 15 million invested. I'm not walking away because of one veterinarian and some wannabe hero. We need to eliminate the problem. Mercer, the vet, anyone who can testify. Burn the clinic, make it look like an accident. The color drained from Highland's face as he listened to his own words condemning him. Jack stopped the playback. That's called conspiracy to commit murder. Federal offense. No statute of limitations. And I have 40 minutes of similar material, including your admission about the Hendersons. Highland said nothing. For the first time since Jack had entered, the developer looked genuinely afraid. The sound of vehicles approaching broke the silence, multiple engines moving fast despite the snow. Jack moved to the window and looked out. 3 black SUVs with federal plates racing up the drive, followed by 2 state police cruisers. Tom Chen had made excellent time. That would be the FBI, Jack said. 5 minutes later, the house filled with federal agents wearing tactical gear and carrying rifles. Tom Chen entered the office first, his eyes sweeping the scene with professional assessment. 2 restrained suspects, 1 SEAL with a rifle, 1 civilian woman with a shotgun, and a German shepherd standing guard. His expression was unreadable. Jack, Tom said carefully, you want to tell me what happened here? Over the next 20 minutes, Jack provided a detailed brief. The attack on Eleanor's clinic. The 4 mercenaries restrained there. The recordings of Highland ordering murders. The ambush on the road where 6 more hostiles had been neutralized. The final confrontation here in Highland's office. Tom listened without interrupting, taking notes, his face growing progressively grimmer. When Jack finished, Tom turned to the other agents. Secure both suspects. Miranda writes, we're taking them into federal custody. And someone get evidence collection teams to 3 locations, the clinic, the ambush site, and this compound. I want everything documented. Agents moved to comply, lifting Highland and Hutchins to their feet and leading them toward the door. Highland regained his voice as he passed Jack. This isn't over, he said. I have lawyers who will destroy everything you've built here. Every piece of evidence obtained through illegal entry, illegal surveillance, illegal, exigent circumstances. Tom interrupted. Mr. Mercer had reasonable belief that imminent danger existed to civilian lives. His actions were those of a private citizen intervening to prevent ongoing felonies. We'll let the court sort out admissibility, but I wouldn't count on technicalities saving you. We have confessions from 4 of your men at the clinic. We have 6 more who attempted murder. We have recordings. We have bodies. The case against you is substantial with or without Mr. Mercer's evidence. Highland was led away, still muttering about lawyers. Hutchins went quietly, his head down, looking like a man who'd aged 20 years in the past hour. When they were gone, Tom turned to Jack. His expression was caught between professional disapproval and personal respect. You should have waited for us. There wasn't time. They were moving on the clinic immediately. The prisoners would have died. Eleanor would have died. Tom glanced at Eleanor, who stood near the window with Titan beside her. Dr. Voss, you're going to need to give a formal statement. Everything that's happened over the past 6 months, the intimidation, the attacks, tonight's events. Can you do that? Yes, Eleanor said firmly. Every detail. I want to see this through. Good. We'll need you to identify properties that Howland acquired through coercion. Financial records, communications, anything that establishes the pattern of his operations. Tom looked back to Jack. You too. Full statement. Everything you witnessed and did. And Jack, the shooting on the road. We'll need to review that incident very carefully. It was self-defense and defense of others. They were armed, had just stated their intention to commit multiple homicides, and opened fire first. I believe you. But there are protocols, reviews. You killed 3 people and wounded a 4th. That requires investigation, regardless of justification. Jack nodded. He'd expected this. Justified or not, lethal force always came with consequences and scrutiny. Over the following hours, the compound transformed into a federal crime scene. Evidence teams photographed and cataloged everything. Agents interviewed Jack and Eleanor separately, taking detailed statements that would form the foundation of the prosecution. The recordings were handed over, copied, and secured as evidence. By late afternoon, the storm had passed completely, leaving the world crystalline and bright under clearing skies. Jack stood outside the compound, watching agents work, Titan beside him, both exhausted but too wired to rest. Tom joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the mobile command post the FBI had established. He handed one to Jack without speaking. They stood in silence for a moment, watching their breath fog in the cold air. 4 of Highland's men are already talking, Tom said finally. Singing like canaries now that they realize they're facing federal conspiracy charges. They've confirmed everything. The Hendersons' murder, 3 other properties acquired through intimidation and violence, even some land deals in Wyoming we didn't know about. Highland's operation was larger than we suspected. What about Hutchins? Requesting protective custody. He's terrified Highland has connections that might reach him even in prison. He's authoring testimony in exchange for reduced charges. The DA will probably take the deal. Hutchins can provide details about the corruption network that we wouldn't get otherwise. Jack sipped his coffee. And Highland? Going to trial. His lawyers are already making noise, but the evidence is overwhelming. Multiple witnesses, recordings, physical evidence. He's looking at life in federal prison without possibility of parole. Good. Tom studied Jack for a long moment. What you did last night and today, it was illegal in about 15 different ways. Breaking and entering, unlawful surveillance, engaging in armed conflict without law enforcement authority. A strict reading of the law says you should be charged. Jack met his friend's eyes without flinching. Are you going to charge me? No, because despite the technical illegalities, you saved lives and brought down a murderous conspiracy that local law enforcement was too corrupt to handle. The Bureau's official position will be that you acted as a concerned citizen, intervening in ongoing felonies, and that any evidence obtained will be considered in the context of exigent circumstances. Tom paused. But Jack, you can't keep doing this. You're not an operator anymore. You're a civilian. Next time you might not be so lucky, legally or physically. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're looking for wars to fight, because you don't know what else to do with yourself. The words hit harder because they were true. Jack had no answer. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. Think about it. You've got skills and training that could be used in 100 different ways. Law enforcement, private security, consulting. Hell, you could teach tactics at Quantico. But this? He gestured at the compound. The evidence teams. The whole chaotic scene. This can't be your life. Eventually it'll catch up to you. Before Jack could respond, Eleanor approached. She'd given her statement and been cleared to leave, but she'd waited. Her face showed exhaustion, but also something lighter. The beginning of relief, maybe, or hope. They're saying I can go home, she said, or what's left of it. The clinic needs repairs, but it's still standing. The animals are all safe. That's good, Jack said. Eleanor looked between Jack and Tom, sensing she was interrupting. I wanted to thank you both, Mr. Chen, for bringing the resources to end this. And Jack, her voice caught slightly. For everything. For stepping up when no one else would. For risking your life. I know thank you isn't enough, but it's all I have. It's enough, Jack said quietly. Will you stay? In Pine Haven, I mean? At least for a while. The town's going to need time to heal, and having someone like you around. She trailed off, seeming to realize she was asking too much. Jack was quiet for a moment, looking out at the mountains rising beyond the compound. He'd come here seeking isolation and found exactly the opposite. Connection, purpose, a reason to use his training for something that mattered. Tom was right that he couldn't keep operating like this. But Tom was also wrong if he thought Jack could simply stop being what he was. I'll stay until you're settled, Jack said. Help with repairs. Make sure no one else from Highland's organization comes looking for revenge. After that, he shrugged. I don't know yet. Eleanor smiled, the first genuine smile Jack had seen from her. That's enough. More than enough. Tom's phone buzzed. He checked it and grimaced. I need to get back to coordinate with the evidence teams. Jack, we'll need you available for follow-up interviews over the next few days. Don't leave the state. Understood. Tom headed back toward the command post, leaving Jack and Eleanor standing in the cold afternoon light. Titan sat between them, his attention shifting between both humans, sensing the emotional undercurrents. You should get some rest, Jack said. It's been a long 24 hours. You too, when's the last time you actually slept? Jack tried to remember and couldn't. 40 hours, maybe more. His body was running on adrenaline and conditioning. But the crash would come eventually. They drove back to the clinic together, Eleanor behind the wheel, Jack in the passenger seat with his rifle across his lap and Titan in the back. The town looked different in daylight after the storm. Pristine and peaceful, giving no hint of the violence that had occurred in the darkness. The clinic bore evidence of the previous night's attack. Broken windows, damaged doors, scattered debris. But the structure was sound, and Eleanor was right that repairs were possible. The 3 rescue dogs emerged from their kennel runs as Eleanor entered, tails wagging, apparently unbothered by the chaos. Jack helped her secure the broken windows with plywood and plastic sheeting, temporary fixes until proper repairs could be made. They worked in companionable silence, both too tired for conversation. When the immediate security concerns were addressed, Eleanor made more coffee, and they sat in her attached residence, warming up after the work. What will you do? Eleanor asked. After you leave, I mean. Jack shook his head. I honestly don't know. Go back to my cabin, I suppose. Try to figure out what a retired SEAL does with the rest of his life. You could do what Tom suggested. Consulting, training, security work. Maybe. Eleanor studied him. My husband struggled with the same thing when he came back from Vietnam. He'd spent 3 years as a combat medic, saving lives under fire, working with purpose and intensity. Then suddenly he was home, and nothing felt important enough by comparison. He said civilian life felt hollow, too slow, too safe. He became a veterinarian, found a different way to save lives. It wasn't the same intensity, but it mattered. Animals needed him. Their owners needed him. He found purpose again, just in a different form. She paused. I'm not saying you should become a vet, but maybe there's something similar for you. A way to use what you are without having to be in combat. Jack nodded slowly. The idea wasn't new. He'd considered it before. But hearing it from someone who'd lived through a similar situation with someone she loved made it feel more possible. Before he could respond, vehicles arrived outside. State police cruisers and an ambulance. The 4 mercenaries from the treatment room needed to be transferred to secure medical facilities and then to federal custody. Jack assisted with the transfer, ensuring each prisoner was properly documented and secured. Garrett, in particular, looked defeated, all his earlier arrogance gone. By evening, the clinic was secure. The prisoners were gone, and Eleanor was safe, under state police protection, until the investigation concluded. Jack returned to his cabin as the sun set, painting the snow-covered mountains in shades of orange and red. The structure felt different than when he'd left it. Still isolated, still quiet, but no longer a refuge from the world. He'd been pulled back into connection with people, with purpose, with the part of himself that needed to protect and serve. Isolation suddenly felt less like healing and more like running away. He built a fire, fed Titan, and sat in his chair by the window as darkness fell. The dog lay at his feet, finally relaxed for the first time in 2 days. Jack's phone buzzed with a text from Tom. All suspects in custody. Evidence secured. You did good work. Illegal work, but good work. Jack smiled slightly and pocketed the phone. Outside, the forest was silent, peaceful, beautiful. Inside, for the first time in 8 months, Jack felt something approaching peace himself. 3 months later, spring had begun its slow conquest of the Montana mountains. Snow remained in the highest elevations, but the valleys had thawed, revealing green grass and wildflowers. The forest surrounding Pinehaven transformed from stark winter monochrome into something alive with color and movement. Birds returning, streams running full with snowmelt, the whole world waking from hibernation. Jack Mercer stood on the newly rebuilt deck of Eleanor Voss's veterinary clinic, coffee cup in hand, watching the morning sun climb over the eastern ridges. The clinic looked better than it had before the attack. New windows, reinforced doors, fresh paint that made the whole structure seem renewed rather than merely repaired. The community had rallied, volunteers contributing labor and materials until the work was done. Eleanor had tried to pay for everything, but most people refused, saying they owed her for 30 years of treating their animals with compassion and dedication. The door opened behind Jack, and Eleanor emerged carrying her own coffee. At 62, she looked younger than she had 3 months ago, as if the resolution of her nightmare had lifted years from her shoulders. The bruises had long since faded, replaced by the healthy color of someone who could finally sleep without fear. "You're up early," she observed, joining him at the railing. Old habits. Titan. Etan had me awake at 0500, like always. The German shepherd in question lay in a patch of sunlight near the door, completely relaxed, his healing shoulder barely bothering him anymore. He'd become something of a local celebrity. Children asked to pet him, adults thanked him like he understood human speech. Titan tolerated the attention with patient dignity, though he clearly preferred quieter moments like this. Eleanor sipped her coffee, content with the silence for a moment before speaking. "The trial starts next week. Tom called yesterday to confirm we're both still willing to testify." "We are." Highland's lawyers are apparently arguing that he was just a businessman who got in over his head, that the violence was committed by rogue employees acting without his knowledge or consent. Jack snorted. "The recordings prove otherwise. The jury will see through it." "I hope so. I want to look him in the eyes when they read the verdict. I want him to know that terrorizing me was the biggest mistake he ever made." There was steel in her voice that hadn't been there 3 months ago. The experience had changed her, hardened something that needed hardening, while leaving her essential kindness intact. She'd become someone who could face down nightmares and come out stronger. "How long will you stay after the trial?" Eleanor asked, trying to keep her tone casual but not quite succeeding. Jack had been avoiding this question, but he couldn't anymore. "I don't know. My lease on the cabin runs another 3 months. After that." He shrugged. "You could stay. Pinehaven could use someone like you. The town council has been talking about creating a new position, community safety coordinator or something similar. Someone to work with the new sheriff, help train volunteers, coordinate emergency response. They specifically mentioned you." "I'm not law enforcement, Eleanor." "No, but you're someone people trust, someone who prove he'll stand up when it matters." She paused. "And you've been helping at the Veterans Center every week. Those men look up to you. You're making a difference." She was right. Jack had started volunteering at the small Veterans Center in town, initially just to stay busy, but gradually realizing the work mattered. Talking to other combat veterans, helping them process trauma and transition to civilian life, using his own struggles to give context to theirs. It felt purposeful in ways he hadn't expected. Before Jack could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from Tom Chen. "Call me when you get a chance. Something you should know about." Jack excused himself and dialed. Tom answered on the second ring. "Jack, good morning. How's Montana treating you?" "Better than it was 3 months ago." "What's up?" "I wanted to give you advance notice before it hits the news. The Highland case broke open something bigger. The investigation revealed connections to similar land fraud operations in 3 other states. We're looking at a criminal conspiracy involving multiple developers, dozens of corrupted officials, and potentially hundreds of victims. The Bureau is creating a task force to investigate the entire network. Jack felt something stir in his chest, the old familiar pull of a mission that mattered. How big? Big enough that we need people with specific skill sets: investigation, tactical operations, witness protection. People who can work in remote areas and handle themselves when things get dangerous. Tom paused meaningfully. We need someone with your background. Former special operations, proven investigative instincts, comfortable working independently in hostile environments. You're offering me a job? I'm saying there's a position open as a consultant to the task force. Contract work, not a full agent role, but legitimate employment with federal backing. You'd be doing essentially what you did here in Pine Haven, but legally, with proper authority and resources, helping victims, taking down predators, using your training for something that matters. Jack looked out at the mountains, at the town he'd come to know, at Eleanor standing nearby pretending not to listen. Everything Tom described was exactly what Jack needed: purpose, structure, a way to be what he was without being in active combat. Can I think about it? Of course. But Jack, this kind of opportunity doesn't come around often. The Bureau doesn't typically hire former operators as civilian consultants. I had to call in significant favors to make this happen. If you're interested, I need to know within the week. I'll let you know. And Tom, thank you. Thank yourself. You earned it. After hanging up, Jack stood silent for a long moment. Eleanor moved to stand beside him. That sounded important, she said. Jack told her about the offer. Eleanor listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. Will you take it? She asked when he finished. I don't know. It's what I'm trained for, what I'm good at. But it means leaving here, moving wherever the investigations lead. Probably not having any permanent base. Sounds lonely. It does. Eleanor smiled slightly. For what it's worth, I think you should consider it seriously. Not because I want you to leave. I don't. You've become a friend, and this town owes you more than we can repay. But because I think you need this. You've been adrift since you retired, looking for purpose. This could give you that. She was right, and Jack knew it. The past 3 months had been healing. But they'd also been temporary. He couldn't stay in Pine Haven forever. Couldn't keep living in a rented cabin waiting for the next crisis. He needed forward momentum, needed to be moving towards something rather than just existing. Over the following days, Jack thought about the offer constantly. He drove through town, noting how much had changed. Sheriff Hutchins was gone, replaced by a former state police sergeant who'd moved to Pine Haven specifically to help clean up the corruption. The 4 properties Highland had acquired through intimidation were being returned to their original owners or their heirs. The Henderson family's ranch, where the elderly couple had died, had been purchased by the county and converted into a memorial park. The town was healing, moving forward, building something better from the wreckage of what Highland had done. Jack visited the Veterans Center, where a dozen former service members gathered weekly to talk, share experiences, and support each other through the difficult transition to civilian life. A young Marine named David, 26 years old, with 3 tours in Afghanistan behind him, approached Jack after one session. I heard about the job offer, David said. The FBI thing. You going to take it? Jack was surprised. How did you hear about that? Small town. Word gets around. David shifted uncomfortably. Lie, I just wanted to say, whatever you decide, you've helped me more in 3 months than 2 years of VA counseling. You showed me that what we did over there matters. That the skills we learned can be used for good things here. That we're not just broken people waiting to snap. The words hit Jack harder than he expected. He'd been so focused on his own struggle that he hadn't fully recognized the impact he was having on others. You're not broken, Jack said quietly. None of us are. We're just trying to figure out what comes next after the most intense experience of our lives. That's not weakness. That's being human. David nodded, his eyes bright with emotion he was trying to control. If you take the job, I get it. But I hope you come back sometimes, talk to us. Remind us that there's life after combat. I will. That's a promise. The week passed quickly. Jack spent time with Eleanor, helped with repairs around town, trained Titan through increasingly complex exercises to keep the dog's skills sharp. On the 7th day, he called Tom Chen. "I'm in," Jack said. "When do I start?" Tom's relief was audible. 2 weeks. That gives you time to close out your affairs in Pinehaven and get to Denver for initial briefings. "Welcome to the task force, Jack. You won't regret this." After the call ended, Jack sat on his cabin's porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Titan lay beside him, head resting on Jack's boot, the Daunt's favorite position when they were both at rest. "Looks like we've got a new mission, boy," Jack said, quietly. Titan's tail thumped once against the wooden deck, a gesture of acknowledgement and readiness. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparations. Jack gave notice on his cabin lease, packed his minimal belongings, said his goodbyes to people who'd become more than acquaintances. The town threw him a small gathering at the diner, nothing fancy, just good people expressing gratitude to someone who'd stood up when no one else could. Eleanor gave him a gift at the gathering, a photograph she'd had framed. It showed Jack and Titan standing outside the clinic on the day after the attack, both looking exhausted but alert, the morning sun breaking through storm clouds behind them. She'd captured it on her phone without Jack noticing. "So you remember that sometimes the most important battles are fought at home," she said, "and that you made a real difference here." Jack studied the photograph, seeing himself as others apparently saw him. Not a broken veteran struggling with purpose, but a protector who'd used his training to save lives and bring justice. Maybe both versions were true. Maybe the key was learning to accept both. On his final morning in Pinehaven, Jack drove to the Henderson Memorial Park. It was a beautiful piece of land, 15 acres of meadow and forest overlooking a valley, with a simple stone monument listing the names of Jonathan and Margaret Henderson, along with the dates of their births and deaths. Beneath the names, a quote: "They love this land and each other, and they refused to surrender either to those who valued profit over people." Jack stood before the monument for a long time, Titan sitting quietly beside him. He thought about the Hendersons, about Eleanor, about all the victims of Highland's greed. He thought about the task force he was joining, and the people he'd help in the future. Tom was right. This was what Jack needed. Not isolation, not running from his past, but running towards something that mattered. Taking everything the military had made him into and using it to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. The sun climbed higher, warming the morning. Birds sang in the trees. The world continued its patient work of healing and growing. Jack returned to his truck, loaded the last of his gear, and began the drive toward Denver and whatever came next. In the rearview mirror, Pinehaven grew smaller, eventually disappearing around a mountain curve. But the town wasn't behind him, not really. It was inside him now, part of the foundation he was building for whatever life came next. His phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "First assignment briefing is tomorrow at 0900. Hope you're ready." Jack smiled slightly. Ready was probably too strong a word. But he was willing, and he was moving forward. And for the first time since Kandahar, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Beside him, Titan settled into the passenger seat, head resting on the console, completely at peace. The dog had been Jack's partner through combat, through darkness, and now through whatever came next. Some bonds transcended words, transcended explanation. They simply were. The highway stretched ahead, leading toward new missions, new people to protect, new battles to fight. Jack accelerated smoothly, merging into the flow of traffic. Just another vehicle among many. But inside that vehicle was a warrior who remembered his purpose, a dog who'd never forgotten loyalty, and a story that proved one person with conviction could stand against institutional evil and win. Because somewhere out there, someone was waiting for a hero. Someone was being threatened, intimidated, pushed toward despair by people who thought power meant they could do whatever they wanted without consequences. And when that call came, when duty whispered that it was time to act, Jack Mercer and Titan would be ready to answer. Not because they were looking for fights, not because they couldn't let go of their past, but because being a warrior wasn't about seeking violence. It was about standing up when others couldn't. It was about using strength to protect weakness, about refusing to look away when injustice happened right in front of you. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel. Tell us in the comments what you would have done in Jack's situation. Would you have walked away, or would you have stood and fought? Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that good people still exist in this world, people willing to risk everything to do what's right. Because in the end, that's what matters. Not the size of your bank account or the power of your position. Not whether you win every battle or come through every fight unscathed. What matters is whether you stood up when it counted. Whether you used whatever strength you had to protect those who needed protection. Jack Mercer understood that now. And as he drove toward whatever challenges awaited in Denver, toward new missions and new people to help, he carried that understanding like a light against the darkness. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in 8 months, Jack wasn't running from anything. He was running toward something, and that made all the difference. God bless you all. Stay strong, stand up, and remember, when duty calls, true heroes answer.